Welcome to today's Wellness Watch. Our session today comes from Season 1 of Wellness Watch, which was originally recorded on Learn It Live, our live learning platform. If you have any questions, please be sure to put them in the comments below. Please do also like and subscribe to The Dancing Herbalist for more herbal medicine, wellness, and health-related content. I hope you enjoyed today's session on clean eating. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Watch with the Dancing Herbalist. This week, we're going to be talking about clean eating. How are you doing this morning, Annabelle?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. It's been a morning already. It's been busy.
Morning.
Yeah.
Busy morning.
So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jillian Karnick. I run the Dancing Herbalist. I have a Master of Science degree in herbal medicine. I am also a nutritionist, certified personal trainer, and exercise is medicine professional through the American College of Sports Medicine. And yes, that's a mouthful. With the Dancing Herbalist, I generally focus on topical herbal products for joint and muscle pain, as well as skin sensitivities, irritations, and the like. I do also offer consultation services for wellness-related support if you're looking for more support beyond the sessions we have here.
Oh, hi, my name's Annabelle, and I like to join Jillian every week on this Wellness Watch. I am the author of Conscious Canary Chronicles blog, a pharmaceutical injury survivor, an avid plant-based raw food explorer, and a home herbalist and health advocate. So yeah, it's been a busy morning. Glad to be here. And our topic today is one we can talk about for
days, months, years, lives. Like every time something new comes up in food, you have to have new ways to, as food changes, right? And you have to change what clean eating means. But if you're interested in finding more things from The Dancing Herbalist, we do have a free newsletter we offer at thedancingherbalist.com. You can sign up for that there. We're actually getting ready for a bit of a celebration throughout May, where we're going to be celebrating National Herb Day, which is the first Saturday in May. And for that, we're going to be playing Herbal Bingo. I know, it's a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun last year doing it. So if you want to find more out about the botanical bingo, you can find that at thedancingherbalist.com. And you can also shop for our products there as well. Now, seeing you found Learn It Live, you already know that we have some free and paid classes here on Learn It Live. These are different things about herbal medicine, nutrition, plant identification, and we're actually going to be starting our new herbal philosophy class next month as well. So that's going to be kind of another special thing we're doing for May. So I'm really looking forward to the herbal philosophy class. Have you done much studying about herbal philosophy, Annabelle?
No,
yeah, so it'll be great. You're gonna come sit on those classes, right?
Yes, that's
great. And we do, if you have questions after these sessions and you want to chat with an herbalist or someone else from the Dancing Herbalist, the best way to do this is to actually go to our Facebook group, which is called the Dancing Herbalists Herbies. You can follow the annoying link that's on the screen here, or you can just search on Facebook, the Dancing Herbalists Herbies. But as we said, this week we're going to be talking about clean eating. If you wanted to look at our recording for last week where we looked at what, water, and why. But next week we're going to be looking at options beyond meat and then something sweet. Now, Annabelle is a vegan mostly out of need, right. And I usually tend to eat vegetarian with meat on top of that. Like it's kind of like right. So we're not like, you must be vegan, but we want to look at some other options beyond meat, so don't be scared off by that. And something sweet, we're going to talk about good and bad kinds of sweet things. So right. We're going to really kind of run the whole gambit with that, I think.
Right, and that's one of my favorite topics because, yes, vegan, but I'm primarily fruitarian. So most of my diet is fruit, so definitely something sweet.
And I got a nice sweet smoothie here.
So clean eating, I mean, there's just so many places to start, and I almost don't even know where to begin on that.
Why don't we start by defining clean eating?
Well, in my definition, clean eating is something that goes along with the body in the sense that it doesn't inhibit or disrupt the four basic functions of our body, which is digestion, absorption, utilization, elimination. So anything that goes inside of our body that's clean and meant to be in our body, we're not going to have a hard time digesting. We're not going to have a hard time absorbing, utilizing, or eliminating. So in my mind, I use that as sort of the core basis, and I branch out from there. And because there's all these different avenues of where to go to get clean food and what food is clean and what is not, and labels. And
yeah, it's so hard to know with labels too, especially seeing a lot of larger companies are changing words.
Right.
I mean, sugar is not just sugar anymore. I mean, you might find something that says like, I don't know, bee
dextrin,
or well, you might find bee nectar or something like that.
Right.
Like, I mean, it sounds stupid because we would just kind of be like, that's honey. But like, you're going to find some like stupid things like that that are out there because big companies have the money to pay to say, hey, look, we're now going to call this other thing. And for instance, like high fructose corn syrup now has new names as well. Right. And there's good and bad things about it. There's good and bad things about it because it can be good for corporations, of course, because then they will sell more things if you're scared of the words that they have on there.
Right.
But also, we sometimes do have fears around things, and they're not always good for us. Sometimes they are.
Right.
But just kind of keeping a little bit of an open mind when. So for a long time, people were very scared of fats, for instance, and everyone would avoid fats and oils. And now we're very much like, you need to get some fats and oils.
Fats in,
yes,
right.
but some people are still scared of seeing that on the nutrition labels. They'll see, oh, this is a very high fat content. But now there's been some changes to that. So we now see some other ingredients on there that we feel less scared of.
Right.
But there's so positives and negatives to this. But I think for clean eating, for me, it's not just the body. It's not just our bodies.
Right.
It also has to do with our environment as well, and keeping our environment healthy. Now, I personally, because I have a background in evolutionary biology, I'm very much interested in like how our bodies evolved to deal with the foods that we're exposed to naturally, like how we have grown and evolved. And so I like to make sure that I try to think of only eating foods that have been grown in that method without being altered from their natural growth patterns. But also because of that, there are certain ways our bodies have evolved the same way plants have evolved over time to be able to utilize each other more effectively. So for instance, like plants will evolve to have a sweet fruit so that we will eat the sweet fruit and then disperse the seeds. So this is the case for a lot of animals, but like I think that this kind of goes into genetic modification of plants because, as you were saying, that there's really, as long as you're keeping our body working properly with those 4 different pathways, then that can be one method of labeling clean eating. And sometimes GMOs will still work with all of those. And there's different kinds of genetic modifications that can be done to plants and animals, but we tend to not do them to animals so much.
That takes place all the time.
It does, and that's natural evolution. Right. But there's selective breeding. For instance, one plant that I'm sure everyone has had that has been selectively bred for, actually there's 2 very popular ones, are corn,
right,
and bell peppers.
Right.
And those are 2 that have not naturally evolved on their own, but they evolved to be what we see today because of human selection. So we have always chosen the biggest and the brightest of them. And over time, those are the ones we plant the seeds from. So we grow bigger and better bell peppers, bigger and better ears of corn. And that kind of evolution and that kind of modification to the genetics is a natural process. The genes that are effective are kept, and the genes that are not necessarily as effective are able to be lost easily. But with genetic modification in a lab, you don't necessarily keep some of those smaller gene strands that might have these minute changes to how the plant grows that is not going to change how we select for it, but it might change its interactions with our own bodies, and we don't really know. And that's the downside to genetically modified foods, is we really just don't know. So I'm much more for selective breeding when it comes to genetic modifications, but it takes time.
This even goes even away from plants when we talk about cattle, when we talk about poultry. So, you know, clean eating is, well, for myself, the way I view everything is that, you know, I am a part of nature. My belly is the soil, you know, and I always think of my belly as the soil. And when something comes across, that's how I review it, whether it's a scientific review, whether it's a food. I think about it in its natural surrounding. And I try to understand how that plant comes to be, how it grows, how it thrives, how it is harmed and injured. And then I model myself with that. But, you know, it's quite interesting because we really don't know the issues with genetic modification. We do know, well, you know, that could be up for debate, but some of the modification is stuff that we're becoming more aware of the dangers of. For instance, something that's genetically modified to be Roundup ready, that's modified to be able to be resistant of a parasite, a pesticide, herbicide, by inserting that herbicide, pesticide into the genetic makeup of that plant.
Yeah.
And then what people don't seem to understand, which for me, it took a long time, is I always thought I was washing off my pesticides. So here we go with clean eating. How do you clean your food? But what I didn't understand is that whenever you consume something that has glyphosate in its genetic makeup, it permeates every cell of the plant, and you cannot wash it off the plant. So that's where we get into shopping, you know, and where I started was with those cheat sheets, the Clean 15 and
the Dirty Dozen. Yeah, that's definitely the best place to start for this kind of thing. I 100% agree with you on that.
And learning PLUs, the things that begin with 9 or grown organically, you know, but again, just because you buy organic doesn't necessarily mean you're buying clean.
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. I'm going to take a second and look up what the current list is for that, because I don't know.
I looked it up with the EWG. It was quite interesting, actually, because they have corn as on the clean list.
And I can tell you why.
Tell me.
I understand why that is. So there are plants that tend to be on the Clean 15 that have peels.
I see, because that was very interesting to me.
Yes, that's why. So like,
but of course you would have to get organic, right? I mean, anything not organic, you would assume has.
So how I have best used the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So for those of you that don't know these phrases, so the Dirty Dozen are considered to be the 12 plants that are most heavily sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, and things like that, versus the Clean 15 are the ones that have less pesticides and herbicides. So the concept behind having this list is that when you have to basically price check and you can't spend all your money on all the organic things, the Clean 15 are the ones that it's slightly better to purchase conventionally compared to organic. And it's because they're not going to be sprayed nearly as much for one reason or another. Versus the Dirty Dozen tend to be much more sprayed. So right now, the what I found was the 2017 list. I'm not seeing. Oh, here's a 2018 one. Let's look at the 2018 one because we're probably not going to find the 2019 one quickly. So the 2018 Dirty Dozen are strawberries, spinach, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, potatoes, and bell peppers. Now, so all of these things, they don't have peels. So the pesticides and things are going to be sprayed right onto the plants. And these are plants that are highly susceptible to disease and pesticides. So apples, for instance, being number 4, I know a good amount about apples. Apples are very, very likely to get apple maggots growing on them, very susceptible. This is why when you go to a pick your own apple orchard, as soon as that apple hits the ground, regardless of how many seconds it's been on the ground, you don't take that apple with you. You let it go because the whole property is filled with apple maggots.
Right.
And just that split second, they can get introduced onto that apple. And if you put that apple into your box, then your whole box is going to get apple maggots. So this is why, so it's very common spraying for apples, for instance, but same with all of these on the Dirty Dozen. But the Clean 15, so a lot of the Clean 15, in my opinion, are things that are imported and grown in countries where they're less likely to be spraying.
Except when they import, they spray.
Not always, but a lot of times, yes. So they will do that at the ports because they're just mostly worried about bringing in new pests to the country.
Fungicides and things of that nature.
But we look at some of these, a bunch of these also have peels and things that we would get rid of the outer layer. So the first ones are avocado, sweet corn, pineapples, cabbages, and onions. So just those first 5 are all things that have peels that we're not going to eat the outside on.
Exactly. But again, if you're going to get something like sweet corn and you're not going to get it organic, I would make sure that you know the source is not a genetically modified Roundup Ready seed.
Because that's very common with corn in particular. Very common. But some of the other ones that are listed on here, we won't go through all of them. We got papayas, mangoes, kiwis. Those are all things that are going to be imported.
Except again, papayas are highly genetically modified.
Are they really?
Yes, very much. There was a big to-do over in Hawaii whenever they were trying to do the glyphosate ban because they had brought in genetically modified papaya. And there's a huge debate over there still. So again, I would be very careful with papaya and I would know my source. You can call these sources directly, but you also, for clean eating, can get involved in your local agriculture and you can grow stuff yourself. You can grow greens indoors all year round. Depending on where you live, I mean, you could get a lot of food growing on your own.
Yeah. And one little thing to make sure, remember, it's very easy to forget this. If you are growing things, you need organic soil.
Right.
And you need organic manure and things like that. If the cow you're getting your manure from is not eating organic, then it's not organic and your food's not organic. It's the whole big cycle, and it's very hard to get organic natural fertilizers.
Do you know the other thing I add that is strange, but it's been working amazingly? Activated charcoal.
To your soils?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's another thing that's very common to add, especially when you are planting peppers. And this is something I always was taught was basically a gold standard when you're growing peppers is, so after your pepper has sprouted and it's you have a small plant and you're going to go put it into the ground, you dig your hole, then you put Epsom salts in, and then you put your pepper on top because you need those extra nutrients to actually have the peppers flourish because our soils are so lacking in nutrients. But
so, I mean, that goes along with the clean eating is it's really about the soil health. And that's why I was saying that even if you get organic food, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's got a high nutritional value because it really depends on the nutritional value of the soil. So this is where transparency really comes into play. I mean, you want to know the source of your food and you want to know that it's coming from healthy, rich soil. So you know, same thing whenever you get something from water. If you're getting seafood, that's something to really pay attention to whenever it comes to clean eating. I don't eat seafood, but I have family that eats seafood and other meats. And they have some wonderful resources, especially in Maryland. They have a Wild Maryland website that helps you find clean sourced meats. But I would be careful with seafood and understand that not only is our soil heavily contaminated, our waterways are heavily contaminated.
Especially seeing a lot of seafood that is cheap or filter feeders.
Or farm raised.
Well, so some fish, I think, can be better farm raised than wild, mostly because the wild populations are getting so disrupted. Yeah. But like salmon, for instance, farm raised salmon are so susceptible to disease. And I mean, salmon are made to spawn and then die and rot. I mean, right. That's what they do. And you get in farm raised salmon, because there's so much of that still happens. There's like a lot of death of the salmon. They have to put a lot of like antibacterials and things like that into the water to keep them. So but then there's pluses and minuses. And I really think when it comes to seafood, it's really specific to each fish or thing, and like which waterways it comes from, etc.
Absolutely. And it also, certain fish have different absorption rates of heavy metals. Mm-hmm. So tuna, when I did eat seafood, I mean, I loved tuna, mm-hmm. especially raw tuna for sushi, but nonetheless, you know, I ended up getting very sick with heavy metal toxicity. And that's when I started really, of course, as you know, once I got really sick is whenever I started making a lot of dietary changes. Mm-hmm. And that one made a very big difference. So that's when I really started learning more about, again, almost a list, if you will. I used to have a list of the cleaner fish. Mm-hmm. The fish that didn't have as high metal toxicity. I know
that is high metal list toxicity. Is also out there, like the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen.
So, you know, and I pay attention to the waters that the seafood is grown in, or I mean, it's caught from. So, yeah, I think shrimp was really high on that. List. But also, I think for clean eating, this kind of sounds a little strange, but
this is definitely
keeping things simple, and then understanding your digestive system. So you want to stimulate your digestive system, and you want to help yourself digest things like fats and starches. So of course, on the herbalism side, I'm thinking, well, that's when you want to pair something like lamb with rosemary.
Yes,
because rosemary is going to help you eat the lamb and potatoes.
And that's why, like, even 100 years ago, meats would be preserved with so many herbs, because they're all antibacterial, antifungal, and all those things to basically protect us from the dangers of meat.
Right.
And meat is a great calorie source. But the other downside of meat is that pesticides and other toxins bioaccumulate in meat products.
Exactly.
So,
fat tissues, right.
So if this is a phrase that you're not familiar with, basically, because so you yourself can eat 10 pounds of carrots. Okay, we eat 10 pounds of carrots, so we get 10 pounds worth of chemicals into us, or equivalent. But the cow, if you go then to eat 10 pounds of cow, to make that 10 pounds of cow exist, that cow had to eat 50 pounds of carrots. So you're getting the equivalent of 50 pounds worth of toxicity in your body versus the 10 pounds if you were eating the plant sources.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
So this is one of the downsides to meat, and why getting clean meat sources is more important sometimes than getting clean clean plant sources, because of this bioaccumulation. And I think if if you really want to start eating clean, other than doing the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 and paying attention to those things, I think moving towards a more vegetarian diet compared to a meat-based diet is definitely one of those steps. If cost is the big issue, if you can afford to purchase clean meats, then go for it. But if cost is the big issue, the easiest shift you can make that's going to save you money too is being more vegetarian.
Well, and I think it's also going to save you in the health department in the sense that our culture is protein obsessed.
Yes.
You know, there's meat for breakfast and for lunch and, you know, for dinner, and cooked meat 3 times a day just is not a balanced approach. It's just not a balanced approach. If you do eat meat, you know, and things of that nature, it needs to be not the primary source of your caloric intake.
Yes.
So, and I think that's where the shift is that, you know, the mentality just, it was the same for me, that there really wasn't any balance, and I lacked balance in my entire diet. But in particular, this was also lending to another area of clean eating that I really got turned on to, which was processing. So you can actually have something that's clean, like kale chips or what have you, you know, that I don't buy things that have additives, and, you know, and I don't eat processed food any longer. It took me a long time to get there. But whenever I was eating processed food and I was trying to find clean food that I wouldn't have reactions to and that didn't make me, you know, feel sick, I started learning things about, well, the cans that the foods are put into and the equipment that is used to process the food and the contamination that can happen with, you know, mass production of food. So clean eating, the romaine lettuce thing that happened is a wonderful example. I mean, romaine lettuce is great, you know, and it was organic, I think, too, that was compromised. So paying attention to how food is processed, paying attention to additives that are added to food, and then paying attention to how you clean your food. You always clean your stuff? Like whenever, what is your system there?
I'm lazy, and I accept that I'm lazy. Most of the times I don't clean food that's labeled as organic unless I feel as though it's been in a bag that's dirty.
That's right. Clean bag, it's all good.
I very rarely will wash lettuces or greens unless I can visibly see bugs or dirt on them. And I think part of that for me is because my greens are one thing that my like lettuces and kale, spinach, things like that. Those are things that I do always buy organic. And to some extent, I kind of want the dirt on them because there's the added mineral. I just like a small amounts of things like that. Like I'm not too worried about it. And the funny joke is the bugs are protein. But
I'm less concerned about the bugs as I am concerned about the people that have handled.
That's what I was saying. If it looks dirty or if it's like something like that, I'll definitely wash it.
Kids, you know, like wipe their nose and then try to grab things and stuff. I'm like, oh. But of course, as I, you know, continue to work through this recovery that I've been going through, I've had to be very cautious about keeping the balance because my immune system has been, you know, down for quite some time. My digestive system highly compromised with infection. So I used to do all kinds of different methods of cleaning, but now what I do is since I use lemon all the time, I make my lemon water and stuff the night before and I let it steep. I usually do the second round and I keep the peel and I let some water get lots of infusion of lemon peel and what have you. And I soak my greens in there. Or if they're really like, you know, like a couple of times I've had some really bug heavy greens I've gotten at the store. And then I just use a little bit of baking soda.
Yeah, I 2 months ago or something like that was when I found that you were doing the baking soda thing. And I think that's a great great method for washing. And you can get like plant washes and things like that in the
Yeah.
store. And I think when I see those plant washes, I think a lot of them are for the more conventionally grown foods, because a lot of foods like apples, for instance, are waxed even.
Yes.
And they're waxed for a few different things. I mean, it's for transportation, to prevent disease and things like that during transportation. But you don't want to eat that wax. And I don't think I've ever seen organic fruits being waxed, but there's nothing that says an organic fruit couldn't be waxed.
I've actually just started talking to my produce guy because I picked up an apple and I was like, just feeling it. I was like, there's no way this is not waxed.
I definitely see cucumbers waxed a lot
Yeah.
too. And I usually do wash my cucumbers because of that. And usually I'll even use soap on my cucumbers when I go to wash them, because it's so hard to get that off.
I was wondering, I was thinking about a good wax removal.
And I really don't know what would work well, other than scrubbing.
Yeah, I usually just have one of those fine brushes and I use baking soda. But that's something I think I want to look more into. I've definitely gotten more into wild crafting and foraging for stuff too, which is another thing I've thought about, also goes into the clean eating category. You know, the other day I was thinking, I was like, oh my gosh, dandelion flowers are perfect for harvesting. Now I need to get them and dry them so I can use them in salads and teas. And then I was thinking, well, it's not that simple, because someone was saying, my partner was saying, oh, look, there's dandelion right there. And I'm like, it's right next to the road.
Yep.
That can't be a good idea.
Nope.
So again, then
wild crafting is one of those things that, like, unless you are like miles from road, you're deep in the woods, it's gonna be dirty.
Right.
It's going to have been exposed to something in the air. It's going to expose to water runoff. I mean, like, it's wild crafted herbs are no longer innately better.
Right.
And that's just the unfortunate nature of the United States and all of the toxins we have pumped into the earth around for everything.
Well, it's interesting because I was going to say, whenever I think of clean eating, I think of paying attention.
Yeah.
Which I myself did not learn to pay attention to what I was putting in, on, and around my body until I had a massive health crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So, which tends to be, something that wakes a lot of people up to that. But it's just so interesting, I was at the farmer's market, and, of course, this is a great time of year, and I was really, excited that that's going to be going on again soon. And there was like 8 different vendors there, lots of fruits and veggies, and looked just amazing. And there was only 2 people that didn't spray their food with pesticides whenever I actually asked the questions. So I think for me, clean eating has been like, I've learned to ask lots and lots of questions.
And I want, this is a little bit off topic, but I remember, maybe it was about 6 months ago, I was having a conversation with my mother, and she said something along the lines of, I don't have time to find out this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, this is a thing that's important. Like, knowing and learning about what you're putting into your body, it takes time.
Right.
It takes energy. You have to do this kind of research, and it's very easy to be lazy. Like, I always admit that I'm a lazy person. It's very easy to not do it, and it's very easy to just go out and buy the cheap stuff that you don't really know where it's come from. And that is unfortunately what's causing more and more issues with our environment. It's just not paying attention, as you're saying. And if it's important, you got to put the time and energy into it. And clean eating is one of those things that you have to put time and energy into it. There's small things that you can do that don't take a lot of time and energy. Sometimes they're more expensive. Usually they're more expensive.
Usually
they're more expensive.
But it's interesting because, one thing I really took for granted was that the the companies and the government administrations were ensuring that my food and medicine was safe.
Mm.
And I never ever thought to question that. And so when I learned that, it really was more of a corporate, money driven system, I began asking more questions. But what I found was that it is definitely not easy to ask questions, in the sense, like, an example would be, I wanted to try and find out, there were these pasture raised eggs, and I wanted to try and find out if they were given any grain feed, any conventional grain feed at any point in time. And so it took me about 2 weeks and several attempts to find out that they were given grain feed first on, in the first part of the span of their lives. So what I found is that it's an added chore, in a sense, or difficulty, because there's really not a lot of willful transparency.
Yeah.
So the USDA has just come out, and there's been, of course, most people have heard, there's been a huge debate going on for years about GMO labeling.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of heat. There was a bill that was signed in 2016 that was basically telling these companies that this is going to be coming down the line, and the USDA needs to come out with a label.
Yep.
So a lot of people probably these days have seen little stickers on some things that are GMO free, and they have the little certification there. But the label that the USDA is going to start using by 2022 is not going to say GMO, contains GMO, anything like that. It's a little more ambiguous.
Is that labeling that we were talking about?
Right. So what they're going to call it is bioengineered or biofortified. Now, fortification of food synthetically, in my opinion, is not ever a clean idea. If you remove the nutrition from a food and then you have to synthetically put the nutrition back in, I find that to not be a very healthy source of food.
Yeah. From a public health standpoint, fortified foods, just the phrase fortified foods, is something that's a necessity. From a public health point of view. But on an individual point of view, I am also not for it. The main example I always give of why it definitely is necessary for public health standards is folic acid.
Right.
And so folic acid is something that is necessary for fetal development. And it's very common for women to not get enough of it unless they are eating foods that have been fortified with folic acid.
Unless they're eating whole foods.
And the downside to whole foods with folic acid supplementation, or with getting enough folic acid, is that, again, just like all of our other foods, they don't have the same nutrients they did 50, 100 years ago. Right. So it's still, you can't really get enough folic acid with organic foods. You need to do prenatal supplements and things like that, which is very common. Generally, if you're a person that is awake enough to be having organic foods, you are also awake enough to make sure that you take prenatal supplements. And you probably can get the equivalent in food form, but I mean, if you are taking the time to grow a baby, make sure you are getting all of the nutrients you do actually need.
Right.
Because that folic acid is extremely important. If you're not familiar with it, if you do not have enough folic acid, if mom doesn't have enough folic acid during baby's development, there you get what's called neural tube defects. So basically, it's the equivalent of the spinal column not forming properly. Right. And then the brain may not be able to connect to the rest of the body, basically.
It's very, very significant. I mean, I didn't learn until I was in adulthood that I had a genetic mutation of a folate gene. So my body needs extra folate. I used to take folic acid. I wouldn't take folic acid. Now I would only take folate in a formula. But it's quite interesting because, again, I think about, being born with this. You can see how this comes down from generation to generation, and there's more mutations.
Yep.
But this is also why I focus on foods that are high in folate, or I try to make sure that I grow my own food. I know that the soil is, I like to fertilize with comfrey. That's one of my favorite ones. But I know that the soil has been loved and given all kinds of wonderful nutrition. And then I can clip off a salad and I can feel really good about eating it. Because even something like, there was a salad that I got at the store, in the pack, the greens that are in the
boxes,
but they're in like plastic, clear plastic boxes. And I kept getting a little sick with them, but then I would have these other greens and I wouldn't get sick. And it was the same kind of green. And I was like, what is going on? It was actually, I think it was arugula. And what I ended up finding out was that they chemically clean their greens. And so it wasn't the green I was having a hard time with. Again, it was, even though it was organic, it was chemically cleaned and grown in mass.
Those lettuce bags or boxes do say on them if they're pre-washed, and that's what it's referring to.
Yeah. Of course, it's taken me a long time to learn to read labels. And as you were saying, you have to kind of keep up on it because it's always changing. Right. So this is where I've really come down with being very simple with my food. Also, one way that I find that impacts clean eating is eating seasonally.
Yes, and you were talking about arugula just now, and it made me think of that because arugula is definitely one of those, if you're getting it from a farm stand or something rather than the grocery store, you'll easily see that it's very different at different times of the year getting the same plant. And I think that's really interesting. And like in the middle of the winter, if you're going to like a co-op or an organic market, you're not going to see arugula on the shelves.
Right.
And I usually forget about that because there's random times, but I always want arugula in the spring. And with that, we all have there's just the way our bodies have evolved because greens are usually the first things to come up in the spring.
Right.
They're also the plants that tend to help support our liver and our detoxification processes. So as we've been eating not great foods all winter long,
more acidic, right?
We tend to then use the greens to detoxify ourselves in springtime.
Right.
And arugula is one of those that tends to be a little more bitter in the springtime compared to the summer where it's a little sweeter or it's more sour even. So,
well, think about those. I was thinking about this the other day when I was foraging is, I was paying attention to what was coming up in the very first part of the season because it has been it's been a slow start to spring. But I was thinking about what was coming up and I was looking at everything, and our bodies, just like on a circadian rhythm, are on a rhythm with nature and the seasons. So in the wintertime, I usually eat a little more acidic than I do in the summertime. I usually eat a little more alkaline in the summertime. It helps to keep me cool, and the acidity in the winter helps to kind of help warm me up. But after a long, hard winter, being indoors, indoor pollution, things of that nature, not being able to get out and get in nature all the time like we need to, that's our biggest prescription right there. It's definitely time to detox the body. And you look at the animal life and they do the same. And everything that was coming up was dandelion, cleavers, chickweed, and I was like, all of this stuff is like, get that lymph going again. You guys have been hibernating for months now, stimulate the lymphatic flow, get moving, clean out your liver, And you know, the good thing I love about greens is the cleaning of the colon that greens do.
Yes.
Because we always talk about poop in our
Always, we got to get it in here. Usually around the 10 minutes left too. We're doing great.
I know. Right on cue. Right on cue.
But you know, you're talking about. I mentioned that the greens are really the first thing that comes up at the beginning of the year. But you know, in an area where the soil has been severely damaged for one reason or another, it's usually these detoxifying herbs that are the first ones that start to reclaim the land.
Yes.
It's those dandelions, because they're not only detoxifying our bodies when we eat them, but they're detoxifying the land as well. And you got to keep in mind that means that some of those toxic-y things are probably in the plants if we go to use them. So as when you go to harvest them, that's just something to keep in mind.
But there was some interesting information I was learning, and I don't know much about this, but you'll really like this. There was a couple of herbs, and I'm not even going to be specific with details, that they found growing in highly toxic areas that were highly contaminated with lead and cadmium. Cadmium, yes. So
cadmium. There we go. That's what it's
so they were grown in those areas, and the plants were then taken into a lab and studied to see if they uptake any of the toxin. And these particular ones didn't have any of the toxin inside of them. So, I mean, this is a place that I've just stumbled upon. I have no idea. I don't know the specific herbs, if it's only a few or what have you. Yeah. But I thought about this. And again, you think about clean eating, you know, you definitely don't want to be eating something.
Yeah, that's possibly taking up toxins from the soil.
Right.
But, you know, there's some things like beans, for instance, which are called nitrogen fixers. And this is why beans and soy and things like that in large crop areas are used for crop rotation, because they'll help to pull the nutrients from deeper in the soil up towards the surface for plants that can't get the nutrients that are deeper. So even if like you are growing your own things and you're not adding nutrients to the soil the same way, rotating the plants that are growing in an area from year to year can really help improve the quality of the soil as well.
Yeah, and here's one thing I'm going to try doing, which is really, I never got to tell you about this. It just developed this week, and it's been busy. So one of the things I'm going to start, along with my own compost, is a little earthworm farm.
Lovely.
And I think that's in my soil.
What I have seen from people that use earthworms, because I do have a number of friends that do actually do that. The best way to go about it is not necessarily pay attention to the worms that are in your garden, so to say, but encourage methods of for the worms to break down your own compost, basically, and then use what they've broken down as fertilizer and add that to the garden.
Yeah, I think that's
that way you can specifically feed your worms, and you'll get to learn what your worms like and don't like.
So exciting.
And then put in there, yeah. And there's special like kits that are made and things like that for you to make sure they have the right amount of light, the right amount of moisture, the right soil pHs and things like that. So there's lots of fun things out there. And, you know, I thought about earthworms earlier. Let me look this up for you guys, because I think this is a really good resource. Let me see if I can find it real fast. So, because I've been associate, I've gone to a variety of Mother Earth News fairs. I always am coming across new, different, interesting things when it comes to agriculture there. And I know what I want: worm casings.
Oh yeah, I used those last year in the garden.
I'm not going to find it.
Definitely, I really noticed an improvement in the garden.
Yeah, there is a company that's associated with Mother Earth News. You can look on their website and you'll find advertisements for them, I'm sure. And they sell both worm casings and worms as well, but they sell the worm casings more. And they really focus on all of the food scraps that go into their worms. All those food scraps are organic, and anything that was used to grow those food scraps is organic. So they really focus on making sure that the entire cycle of developing their worm casings, which will go into developing your soil more, they really make sure everything is organic, and they really pay attention to that. And I think they're a great fertilizing option, and they're a great company to learn from. I just can't remember and find their name right now.
Well, it's interesting because there are so many things one thing is I don't have a big area to have a garden, which I know a lot of people, don't have. I don't have land to go grow everything I'd like to grow, but I've been learning some interesting tricks, vertical tricks, indoor tricks, and you can actually do a whole lot with not much.
It's true. One of the things that I like that I've seen people do before, and you don't need a lot of space for it, but you do need some handyman skills kind of thing, is making a potato box.
Right.
So you start with a frame with 4 posts, make a square, and you plant your potatoes in there. You put some walls on the side, only up maybe about 4 inches or so. And your potatoes will start to grow, and your plant will start to grow upwards. When the plant has grown up enough, you then build the walls higher on those posts, and you add more soil. And then more potatoes will grow in that area. And as you keep growing upwards, you keep building this up throughout the season, your potatoes will continue to grow under the soil as you continue to add more soil on top. Then when the fall comes, you undo the bottom boards, and you can take the bottom potatoes out first.
Interesting.
Because you can dig the soil out from the bottom. So the ones above can continue to grow, and it'll sink down. So keep going. But like this whole concept is that you can basically create a continuous potato growth system. And yeah, it's a very interesting idea. And it doesn't take a lot of handyman skills, but like if you've got a nice drill and some wooden boards, you can make it happen.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, it's a really cool system.
I wonder if you can do it with sweet potatoes also.
You might be able to do it with sweet potatoes. I personally have struggled with growing sweet potatoes because they're a vine. The plant itself is like a vine, and it mostly grows in the fall to early winter. So it's a later growing plant than potatoes. So potatoes will grow throughout the whole season, but sweet potatoes really don't start to flourish until it starts to get cooler. So it's a little bit more of a challenge, I think. You may need like some greenhouse kinds of setups for that to keep them warmer further into the fall.
Interesting, yeah. So I mean, I feel like for cleaning, for me, that it's about becoming aware and asking a lot of questions.
Always questions.
And paying attention to how I feel when I eat certain foods. That's really how I actually tell if something is clean or not.
That's exactly it too. I mean, I call this conscious eating. And this is, I don't know if other people call it this, but this is what I've always called it. And really, again, that paying attention to your body. We talked about it before. We'll talk about it again, I'm sure. Like tracking what you're eating, tracking how you feel, not just physically feel, but also mentally feel. Because it's very easy to forget that a lot of our thoughts and our conscious experiences have to do with what we're eating.
Right.
I mean, the easiest one, just think about sugar. I mean, you get happy when you eat sugar. I mean, it's plain and simple. It's what happens.
Except what I found, it's interesting because I having had brain injury and knowing a lot of people that have brain injury, I find that sugar is a big trigger for neurological symptoms, especially when people have clinical depression.
But that same thing, it does still have an effect on the mental state.
Very much. I had a friend of mine call crying. I think I said this in one of our other talks, and she was just in a horrible place, and she said she couldn't stop crying. And I asked her what she ate last night, and she said she had some chocolate cake before bed. And I'm like, okay, sister, here we go. And then I said, you're going to be fine. Just give yourself a few hours, and this will lift. but it's interesting because, you know, really paying attention and keeping that balance, I think is really what it's about for me. But also clean eating is, when you talk about conscious eating, is not eating on the go, not being in a rush, not being stressed about food, not, I mean, if you insert stress even into the healthiest, most nutritionally valued food, you're still doing yourself a disservice. So you want to make it simple and fun and easy and light.
Yeah, food needs to be a joy, not a
Right.
stressor.
Right, exactly. So, so I just love keeping it simple. I do a lot of mono meals.
Can you describe what that means?
Oh, yes. A mono meal is eating 1 to 3 items, no more at one time. So one of my favorite mono meals is bananas. I'll just put bananas and a little bit of water in the blender and blend them up, and I'll just have a nice big bowl of bananas. And that'll be a meal for me. But I try not to combine too many things together, just to help my digestive system stay at rest. Because at the end of the day, if you're not in a relaxed state, then your body's detoxification mechanisms don't turn on.
Yep. If you're stressed and holding on to emotions and things like that, you're going to hold on to toxins. You're going to hold on to your bowel movements.
Right.
You're not going to get rid of stuff.
Right.
If you can't mentally let go of it, you're not going to be able to physically let go of it.
And see, I know a lot of people that having mastocytosis, which we talked about the other time, it's a genetic issue that I have had issues through my whole life where histamine is dysregulated in my body, and I have a hard time, and I end up getting hives or anaphylactic reactions. So I've had a lifetime of really intensive food allergies, and it was really difficult to not be nervous or caught up about what I ate. And I see people doing this on diets, like how many calories did I have today, and really making it stressful and obsessive.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to learn to take the fear and the stress out of eating before my diet changes did me any good, really.
And what I think of with that is that you can never effectively do a diet. It has to be a lifestyle change.
Right.
And this goes with anything. Like, I mean, if you want weight loss, yes, it has to be a lifestyle change. If you're having allergies or emotional experiences in relation to food, you have to change everything. You can change things one step at a time, and that's going to be a long process. And it's always a long process to change these kinds of things. But we're coming to the end now, Annabelle. Any last thoughts about clean eating?
Not particularly. I'm just excited that we're at the beginning of a new season.
Yes.
Which means there's going to be lots of yummy new foods that are heading our way.
Yeah.
I do have a little bit of mourning in this when the fall kind of gives to the winter, because I'm like, oh, this is the more difficult time for fresh fruit and things of that nature. So I'm excited. But
so what foods are you most looking forward to right now?
Right now, what I'm most looking forward to, not really sure. There's so many. I mean, all of the spring fruits, but actually I'm looking more forward to summer. I have to say, I'm not lying, because I'm really wanting some fresh peppers, fresh tomatoes. I'm wanting some fresh corn. So I'm getting excited about spring, but I'm still keeping it pretty simple. But I'm amping up for summer.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite foods.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. If you want to keep seeing other Wellness Watch sessions, be sure to join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedancingherbalist. You get additional blogs and bonus content every week or month. This month, our bonus content is actually on foam rolling, and those are going to start being posted in the next few days. So it's a new kind of fitness practice that I've been doing, but it's basically like a self-massage technique.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really nice for the body. But again, if you have any questions or comments after these sessions, be sure to join the Dancing Herbalist Herbies on Facebook. And what did we say we're looking at next week?
Beyond meat options.
Yes, beyond meat options. I mean, we know you're vegan, Annabelle, but I got to be vegan back in February for a month, and it was definitely a great learning experience for me. And I got some great new recipes that I've added to my repertoire because of it. That's one of the main reasons I like doing food experiments, even though I don't always need to. I think it really expands my cooking. Yeah. Just like springtime foods.
Just like springtime.
Okay. Well, I hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.